going to begin this morning with a story, a true story, an incident that happened. A salesman named Jamie knocked on a door in Twins Falls, Idaho, hoping to sell a vacuum cleaner to the couple who lived there, Andy and Paul. Andy, the woman who answered the door, said that she could not afford a vacuum cleaner because Paul, her husband, was on disability with medical problems. Paul's kidneys had been failing for more than a year, she explained. He was way down on a list of 500 people awaiting a transplant. Part of the problem was that Paul had a rare type O positive blood, so he could get a kidney only from someone with the same blood type. None of their friends or family members was a match. Well, Jamie said, "I'm O positive." That's what the salesman said. "Would you consider being tested to see if you could be a donor for Paul?" Andy asked. Sensing her concern, Jamie said he'd think about it. He went to his car and prayed. Then he called his father, who is a doctor, and he called his wife. "I just felt this was something that I was called to do," he told them. A calm feeling came over Jamie. He hadn't even met Paul. He knew nothing about him other than the fact that they shared the same blood type, and Paul might die if he didn't find a donor. Jamie knocked on the door again. This time he wasn't selling. He was giving. "I'd do whatever I can to help," he said. Well, wouldn't you know it, Jamie and Paul happened to be a perfect match. After months of testing and discussions with doctors, Jamie donated a kidney that saved Paul's life. And today, both men are healthy and strong. Now, I ask, do you think that it was a coincidence that Jamie happened to be selling vacuum cleaners, that he happened to be in that area, that he happened to knock on that door, that he happened to talk to Andy, whose husband needed a kidney? Do you think it just happened by coincidence that Paul had the exact same rare blood type? Did it just happen by coincidence that through all the testing it was a perfect match? Do you think it was a coincidence that Jamie, the salesman, was a Christian and that he was following God in this major decision? Do you think those things were coincidence? No. God has us in the palm of His hand, and He knows our every need. He knows our every struggle. He knows our every dream, and He knows our every desire. The good news is God has it all figured out. And He's a supernatural God. That's the good news. So often we limit our thinking and our believing. Now we think that we'll never overcome our challenges. We'll never accomplish our dreams. But the problem is we tend to look for the answers in the natural. We limit than our perspective to the natural. We forget that God is a supernatural God. And just because we don't see a way that that could happen doesn't mean that God doesn't have a way for it to happen. It seemed to Andy and Paul an impossible thing, way down on the list of donors. In the natural, it seemed impossible. And they couldn't see a way on their own. But God is a supernatural God. And God isn't limited. And often our faith and our belief then must come up to be in agreement with what God says. This reminds me of two scriptures. I have in our notes there, the point to ponder. We tend to look for answers only in the natural. We forget that God is supernatural. Just because we don't see a way doesn't mean that God doesn't have a way. These are two wonderful scriptures that remind us of this. And then I think about and I pray about Luke 1:37. It says, "For with God nothing shall be impossible." And Proverbs 3:5 and 6 that I lean heavily upon says this: "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." The middle part says, "Lean not on your own understanding." His ways is higher than our ways. We can't even imagine those things. Andy and Paul couldn't even have imagined a salesman coming to their house with the exact same blood type, with a person who would be willing to give a kidney. They couldn't have imagined that. But they didn't have to lean on their own understanding. See, that's the problem. We need to walk and lean on him, and in that he shall direct our paths, because he knows all those things. Now the key I put in the middle of your notes to overcoming these challenges that we have in our life is to get into agreement. I put agreement with God. Is we get in agreement with God. We agree with him. He has a supernatural favor. He has supernatural opportunities. He has supernatural healing. He has supernatural provision. He has supernatural restoration. Because in our minds we think, how could that happen in the natural? Well, in the natural it couldn't. But we have a supernatural God who can do supernatural things. God wants to work in our life. He wants to do those things. It's believing in our hearts that this is true, that he does want to work in our life. We must believe them. Even when it seems like everything is going opposite of what you have in your heart, we keep believing these two verses. We keep believing what the Lord has spoken into our spirit. So we need to have an expectation deep down in our hearts. Even before we see anything happen, we must have that expectation. It's the true definition of faith. Hebrews 11:1. I have that definition, that verse in your notes. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. I put that word hope. Faith is the evidence of things hope. 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 So when even things are going wrong in our life, it seems like the tide is against us. It seems like everything is against us. If we stand on these words, stands on those words, those things that God has spoken deep down in our hearts, if we have hope, even when it's all against us, deep down in here, then we have faith. faith is the substance of hope. And so if